Anyone else ever try sketching references from their recurring PTSD flashbacks? Today in Dad Shitpost Red News, 4chaners LARP as 20th century fishermen instead of teenage shut-ins who will likely never do any real labor in their lives. 20th century fishermen, not too far off. December 2005, and we were sailing a Hunter 33 from Virginia to Florida and got ass blasted by a nor'easter. Thinking of doing a whole series of PTSD flashback paintings from my teenage years. Got getting my mask ripped off 19 meters underwater inside of an upside down tanker ship in the St. Lawrence River. Got my being in my dad's first plane crash in Pennsylvania. Got my dad driving off a cliff in West Virginia. Got me skiing off a cliff in Killington. My dad getting vertigo while we were diving off a light tower. Boat crash. Almost boat crash that is for some reason more haunting now. Dad's friend shooting his finger off. My car crash in West Virginia. My car crash in Virginia. The time I broke someone's face up with my elbow, but their tooth cut my elbow and it got super infected in 24 hours. Time I got my face broken up in HS. Some of you bozos weren't children of a psychopath thrill seeker that did crazy reckless shit constantly, and it shows. Didn't read, die edgelord LARPer. I mean, that's the craziest thing about having actually done a bunch of crazy shit. You just assume nobody will believe you and think you're a liar, so you just keep it to yourself, lol. Like, my dad's funeral was crazy because it was just an endless procession of people that had experienced the most traumatic thing in their lives while hanging out with him, and I would remember what they were talking about and it wouldn't even be in my top 10 from that year. Also, my dad was almost certainly the Colonial Parkway killer, since I'm doing an anonymous therapy session. Was targeting women that looked exactly like my mom every time she was pregnant. Switched MOs to inviting couples out on the boat and going out to the bay to do target shooting. Killed the man, assaulted the woman and killed her, threw their bodies in the ocean, and marked the spot on the GPS with their initials, which I discovered when we were giving the dog a burial at sea. He would take the boat out alone later at other times and kind of drift around on top of the pin, presumably masturbating or whatever. After his crash, I took his GPS and flight logs to the FBI and gave them a DNA sample for the hair from the Colonial Parkway killings. And at first, they were stoked, but then they clammed up real hard. Likely because my dad also did freelance spook work at Camp Prairie for the CIA, developing neurofeedback conditioning, and that was why he was always around Colonial Parkway in the first place. But hey, nobody believes me, so I can fucking say it whenever I want, and it does not matter. September 5th, 1989 was the last time there was a murder there. Each murder, besides the first one, was once every year for 3 years until it suddenly dropped. My question is, did your dad die in 1990? No, he got divorced and had more travel and alone time. Could fuck off for 3 weeks at a time. First murders also likely happened in Western New York. He went to William & Mary, which is on Colonial Parkway, for his doctorate. One of the victims in the first couple was taking psychology undergrad classes when he would have been there, and she looked like the clone of his wife, my mom, who he had a weird obsessional, love-hate thing towards forever, particularly because she kept having miscarriages, and he blamed her for it. Other murders, he had a business partner in his neurofeedback software company that was doing contracting work at Camp Prairie who was found hanging from a swing set at a school playground where my dad would have had access to as a school psychologist at the time. Someone near Snowshoe in West Virginia in like 1999 maybe. Someone in Key West in 2012. SLC 2005. He marked in his flight logs on 3 of the days the Colonial Parkway killings happened, hangar time, and an X, and then his day bugs when he was traveling to ski places in the 90s to the 2000s, or Buffalo, or Key West would be mostly just blank, with vacation either written down except for random times where it would either say hangar time or some other hanging pun with an X, including one time when I was with him in SLC and he disappeared all night. Also had terabytes of fake snuff and extreme bondage in hanging porn on him in the crash and in his office. Also straight up drunkenly said a few times during arguments that he had killed people, which seemed like liar trying to be intimidating at the time. Oh, he also drunkenly confessed bragged about how in his neurobiology graduate program he experimented with making meth and LSD, and depending on when he told the story, he either accidentally caused an OD because he was an idiot, or intentionally caused an OD of an idiot that was threatening him. I don't know though, probably a goof. NH Route 149 is haunted. This might be a bit out there, but hear me out, because I have some stories to tell. I'm a New England anon, lived in and around small town NH/MA for most of my life. I have a friend who moved out to an even more remote small town up in the sticks of New Hampshire, and I've driven out there to see him. The only good way to get there is to go through the small town of Hillsborough, which requires hopping on the very obscure Route 149 that goes from Weir, NH, up into and through Hillsborough. For those unfamiliar with the area, all of you, I reckon, this isn't really a highway like an interstate. Hell, it isn't even much like other routes. That area of southern NH is surprisingly hilly and wild. The route wraps around sharp inclines and passes by various swamps and dark woods. The woods of New England are usually thick at right on the sides of the road, but when driving this route at night, the only times I have, it's obnoxious how upon you the woods became. I recall having an aunt from West Texas who proclaimed, "How the hell do any of you drive anywhere? The wilderness is right next to you." First story, be me, about a year ago. First time driving up to my buddy's house. Following Google Maps, about an hour and a half drive. It's around 7:30 p.m., freshly dark. Load up some music and start driving. First thing that surprises me is how secluded these roads are. This can't surely be the fastest way to my buddy's house. Follow the road as best as I can. Otherwise, get there without an incident. Have a good time with my friend's family and chat about the drive up. He agrees that it's definitely a trek. I blew a tire on the drive once, was stuck out there for an hour waiting for AAA, right in the middle of the woods next to a swamp. Pretty creepy, man. Tell them that I was not looking forward to the drive back, but that I'll manage. Don't drink or do drugs or anything due to the unpredictability of the road, and it's illegal. When it's about time to leave, about 2 a.m. or so, I decide to lean into my fear. I load up one of those creepy stories YouTube videos that's like 3 hours long. The drive isn't nearly 3 hours, so that should keep me awake. Get a coffee and chug it at a 24-hour convenience store and start the drive back down. The video works great. Random stories about skinwalkers and ghosts and spooky shit. I'm pretty tired too, so I keep swearing and seeing stuff in the corners of my headlights. Enjoying myself, despite being creeped out. Keep driving. Get pretty into some stories. Other ones I tune out and think about other stuff. Pull over to take a piss in the woods. Nothing creepy happens. Eventually, the video cuts out whilst I'm driving. Check my phone to see if I lost internet connection. The video is over. It was at least 3 hours long, like 3 hours 19 minutes or something. Look at the time, and it's after 5 in the morning. I had been driving for the entire duration of the video. Check the Google Maps, and it says I'm still a half hour out from my destination. I lost like 2 hours of time that night. No explanation why. Second story happened just the other night. Drive up to my buddy's house. This time, I stay cognitive the entire time due to my previous experience with Route 149. It was a cooler night, really foggy too. Once again, the drive up was uneventful, besides a weird amount of roadkill and passing cars with one headlight out. I learned my lesson, and during the drive down, around 11 p.m. this time, I stayed to pop country radio stations instead of spooky shit. Once I hit Route 149, I did not see a single other car. On every other road, downtown Hillsborough, Route 77, and then later on, Route 3, there were a good deal of drivers. Route 149 was a dead zone. Very eerie. Whilst driving, I'm racing down the hills to get home as fast as possible. All the roadkill got me worried about passing animals, a common concern of my area. It can kill you. Eventually hit a sharp left turn that twists around and down a hill, going pretty damn fast. Once I hit the bottom, there's several figures in the road, like 4 to 5 deer right in the middle of the road. They were all gathered around and all look directly at me as I go down the hill. Hit the brakes a few dozen yards in front of them. My truck screeches to a halt. They are all very fucking dirty, like it looked like they had been rolling around in the mud. None of them moved for a good few seconds. I'm genuinely frozen. I knew something was wrong. Just then, at the side of the road, I see something emerge. It's another deer, but it was on its hind legs. I could not tell if it was leaning against a tree or just standing. It was also dirty, but also covered in thick shades of brown and maroon. Maybe blood, or maybe it had red fur, I don't know. Its eyes weren't black, they were pure white, like cue balls, staring right at me from the tree line at the edge of my headlight's glow. It was tall as fuck, overshadowed my truck. Think skinwalker, and floor it out of there. The deer disperse as I take off towards them. Drive home, fast as fuck. Fuck Route 149. Bad vibes. I live around the Macon area, and there is definitely some weird shit out there. Be it a few years while in uni. Working the overnight shift at a gas station. Spent most of my shift on my phone, or doing my job for the occasional trucker. Look outside, and there is some old woman by the pumps, rooting around in the garbage cans. Homeless people usually try and find cig butts to get their nicotine fix. We have an intercom system that feeds to the pumps outside. Turn it on, and tell her to get lost. She stops, and turns towards the store's direction. I can see her, but she can't see me inside because of ad posters on the store's glass. She starts marching towards the door. I see her holding something metal in her hand. At night, the store locks the doors, and the attendant has to let people in. I decide, fuck that, and not let her in. She starts to bang on the glass doors and pull at the handles. She's shouting in Spanish at me with a fuck or a shit thrown in here and there. I yell at her and say to piss off or I'm calling the cops. She punches the glass and runs off. After about an hour, I'm sure she's gone, and I go to make sure that the glass is not scratched. I see that there's some green slime on the door and on the ground. It looks like someone ate green jello and puked it out. It smells like a rotting animal and a burning rubber. I nope it back inside and avoid it. A few minutes later, a customer comes in. I apologize for the mess outside, and he looks at me like I'm a moron. He tells me everything looks fine. When he leaves, I go and look. It's all gone. I finish my shift, and the next day, I tell my manager about the whole incident. She looks me in the eyes and tells me that the next time I should mind my own business. I can still smell the slime when I walk through the door. A friend of mine who works for the city says that they find a foul-smelling green slime in storm drains all the time. About 20 years ago in South Dakota, I got an apartment in a 100-plus-year-old house that had been turned into free apartments. In the apartment, there was a standard bedroom and a very odd room just off from the entryway that had no door and was very small. Overall, that room had a weird vibe. The night I was moving my stuff in, I felt the hair stand up on the back of my neck and felt like someone was watching me. I walked out into the living room, and there was a man in a straitjacket with the most piercing eyes I have ever seen, grinning at me like a psychotic person would. I instantly ran the fuck out of there. I went and picked up a friend and told him nothing about what had happened. I asked him if he wanted to see my new place. We get to the apartment, and I'm in my bedroom, moving stuff in. I hear my friend absolutely screaming in terror. I run out and know exactly what he saw, and I ask him if he saw it too. He did. We run up to his car, decide to pick his brother up, but not tell him anything about what we saw. The first thing the brother does when we get there is walks into that weird room, goes into the corner and pretends he's in a straitjacket. My friend and I freak out and ask him why he did that. He just shrugs and says, "Feels like a room that someone would be in a straitjacket." Long story short, I broke my lease and never went back there. None of us did drugs or had a history of mental illness. Last year, out of curiosity, to make sure I was not making the story up for the past 2 decades, I reached out to my buddy, who saw the Straightjacket man. He said he still remembered it, but we must have been tired. Apparently, being tired means we both see a man in a straitjacket at different times that can appear and disappear. It sounds like a made-up story, and believe me, I wish it was, because I still cannot explain it. This happened to me the other day. Shopping in local hardware store. Everyone looking at me strangely today. While shopping, some crazy woman shouts something at me. I don't remember what she said, just crazy talk. I go on shopping. I go to pay, and the person at the checkout acts like I'm doing it wrong. Looks at me in a strange mocking way, like I fucked up somehow. Crazy woman from earlier is causing trouble for shop security. She tries running away and gets tackled to the ground. What the fuck is going on? I look to the shop entrance. The doors are fucking gone. It's one solid wall like plasterboard. Panic creeps in. I start to think this has to be a lucid dream. Staff start surrounding me, and I try to run for the aisles. Nowhere to escape. Pick up shop tools to defend myself. I'm in a hardware store, so I grab the sharpest object I can find. End up running around the shop with a spade and wood saw. Shop security comes up on me from behind, tackles me. They force me to follow them into the back rooms of the shop. Start to worry they're going to kick the shit out of me, or worse. Walk downstairs. Escorted through a long corridor. All the windows are that blurred glass type stuff you get in bathrooms. I ask them where they're taking me. Ask to just get it over with and let me go. I realize the second guy can't even talk. He's sort of fucked up, like he's brain dead. The other guy is cocky as shit, taunting me like I'm crazy. Keep walking down the corridor until I hear someone else. I stop walking and look into some side room. Staring back at me is someone from my childhood. I instantly recognize them, even though it's been 10 years or so. They look back at me like I was not supposed to see them, like they know something is terribly wrong for me to be here. We lock eyes for a split second, but it feels like forever. Cocky guy escorting me is getting impatient and angry. Hits me and keeps me moving forward. Get to the end of the corridor. Door opens up to some delivery bay area with metal shutter doors. There is a car parked, waiting for me, surrounded by dudes in suits. One of them comes up to me and hits me with the butt of his gun. It's the last thing I remember. Next thing I know, I'm shopping at my local hardware store. I don't know what the hell happened in between then, but it's like I was not supposed to remember this shit. I want to scream and go crazy, but something inside me says act normal and just go on with my life. I do my shopping at a different hardware store out of town now. I'm going to seek psychiatric help after this. I know I'm probably being paranoid and delusional, but yesterday, I went by that place and I noticed the staff looking out at me in the same strange way. Haven't had anything like that experience happen to me since. Everything has just been eerily normal. I've heard of people seeing ghosts of their dogs and cats, but has anyone reported seeing any other kind of animals as apparitions, especially ones that weren't pets? Be me in San Antonio. House/dog sitting for a friend and his girlfriend for a couple days. At night, in hall bathroom, brushing my teeth. Dog is sitting in the hall behind me, watching me in the mirror. I look down at him in the mirror. Out of nowhere, see a translucent tail. Looks like a giant rat tail, about 8 to 9 inches long and almost 3/4 of an inch thick at the base. It's 6 inches above the floor. It whips around the doorframe from inside the bathroom, shoots past the dog right in front of his face, and turns the corner toward the living room. Dog sees it and flips out, chases it around the house. I chase after the dog. Dog stops in front of the door leading into the garage. Nothing in the garage. I stayed at their house many times after that, but never saw it again. About a block from their house is one of those concrete drainage waterways that goes through the neighborhood. How big do rats get in Texas? San Antonio is haunted as fuck. So, are there small demonoids that have rat tails? I don't know much about rats or demons. It was 14 years ago. I was deep-sea fishing off the edge of the Atlantic continental shelf. Something took my line, fast. I had a tight hold on the rod, and I was right at the edge of the boat. The force was so quick, I pulled over the side of the boat and down, deep, deep down, very, very fast. I went so far down so quickly that it was completely pitch black, extremely cold, and the sound of the boat propeller was drowned out by the immense pressure and distance. My ears popped, but not in the good way. The tympanic membrane in both of my ears ruptured. I broke blood vessels in both of my eyes, and I felt like my whole body was in a vice. Water rushed into my throat. I had let go of the rod for at least 10 seconds, though I was not sure if I was floating upwards or staying still. I thrashed rapidly, trying to move in any direction. I wasn't sure which was what, but I did not want to just sit there. Suddenly, something huge hit me from behind. It felt like it pushed me forward 30 or 40 feet. It was so massive, I felt it on the entire back of my body, back of my head, back, shoulders, thighs, calves, and ankles. It was big. It felt like a huge rock. It was really cold, and it was moving fast. I went unconscious shortly after I was hit. What was recounted to me later, apparently my body floated to the surface in a dead float about 5 or 6 minutes after I went under. The physical evidence and damage to my body put that I was dragged very, very deep, very, very fast. Though the massive object hitting me is met with skepticism, they think it was part of my dreaming in my unconscious state. Some people think it was a whale. Some think it could have been a submarine. Real skeptics think I just floated up and was hit forward by the boat. I'm not sure. All I know is I will never go out to the ocean ever again. On a typical Okanagan afternoon in the summer of 1932 or 1933, Henry Murdoch was practicing for the marathon swim at one or other valley regattas. He planned to swim from the point where the Maud Roxby Bird Sanctuary is situated to the dock at the old El Dorado Hotel. His pilot boat was being rowed by John Ackland, one of his best friends. Everything was going fine with Henry, swimming about 20 feet behind and slightly to the side of the boat. When they were off the south end of Boise's Fleet, Cedar Avenue, John rested his oars and bent down for a few seconds to light a cigarette. When he looked up, Henry had disappeared. At first, he thought that Henry was playing a trick on him by swimming up and hiding under the boat. Very soon, he realized that there was something wrong, so he searched the clear, 8-foot deep water frantically for about 20 minutes before rowing to the shore and running up to the nearest phone to call the police. Within 2 hours, there was a search party out with several boats dragging for the body and swimmers searching as best as they could. The search continued for 2 days, but Henry's body was never found. Henry had been the lifeguard at the El Dorado Arms Hotel and was considered at the time the strongest swimmer in the Okanagan. All very strange when you consider that the water was very clear and shallow, and there was no discernible current in that part of the lake. People go up there constantly. It's got a bit of a reputation for being a place where scumbags hang out. There's beer cans and graffiti everywhere. It's kind of sad to have the place in such disrepair. I have pics, but none on this computer. Just search for Hellfire Club on Google Images. There's bound to be a ton of them. It is essentially a bare stone building with some blackened parts. Of course, people have gone up and set fires in it too. It's 2 stories big, with rickety metal stairs for access to the second floor. The view from the summit is great though. You can see nearly all of North Dublin from it, right out to the ocean, if I recall correctly. The most haunted place, however, is a place called County Offaly, called Leap Castle. You're bound to find a good few stories online about it, but it's now actually lived in by some ballsy guy. The most notorious haunting is a half-human, half-sheep beast thing that stinks that traverses the main stairway. It was about the middle of August in 1946 that Andy Aikman and I saw the Ogopogo. Andy was 15 and I was 13, but we were no strangers to Lake Okanagan. I had lived on the lake shore since the summer of 1929, and Aikman's lived just 1 block away. We were both sea cadets and had spent every possible hour since preschool days just swimming, boating, and, in the winter, skating on the lake, so we knew it all very well, and we definitely did not believe in the existence of any kind of lake creature. Back to mid-August 1946, we had heard a rumor that Mr. Crichton of Okanagan Mission had been catching a sturgeon a couple of miles south of Cedar Creek, so we decided to go down from there in Andy's old spread trapper's canoe, to camp for 4 days and see if we could catch some. So, on a very hot, drowsy, completely calm and windless afternoon, with flies buzzing just above the surface, and groups of seagulls sitting on the water, thinking seagull thoughts, and waiting for the kokanee to start running, we were off the mouth of Mission Creek, 100 yards from shore. Heading south to the Cedar Creek campsite, I was rowing. You did row and not paddle this strange craft, when Andy, sitting in the stern of the boat, hooked a fish. I shipped the oars, reeled in my line, and netted his fish for him. We were both excited at actually catching a fish, a rare event in those days, and no thoughts of Ogopogo or anything else. All this activity took perhaps 2 minutes, and during this time, we had silently drifted to within 20 yards of a large group of seagulls. Suddenly, they all started to screech in terror and took off from the surface as straight up as a gull can go. Following them was the head and neck or body of a large creature. When they'd reached the height of about 14 feet, the creature grabbed one of the gulls in its mouth and disappeared back below the surface, leaving only a few ripples on the glassy surface of the lake. The whole incident took only a couple of seconds. It started all the other gulls within hundreds of yards flying and screaming. O.L. Jones, later RMP, had a summer cabin just south of the creek, and the Joneses' children, who were friends of ours, came running down from the cabin to the beach to see what all of the noise was about. Andy and I were scared to death and gave up our great fishing expedition right then and there. We spent the night as far up from the lake as possible on the Joneses' beach and headed for home the next morning. The whole sighting was more or less a blur of movement and high-pitched sound, and I cannot say exactly what the creature looked like. I do remember, though, that directly following the incident, when asked the size of the creature, I said it was about as big around as a telephone pole, and that the color was dark and fish-like. When asked if it had a head like a horse, as in most drawings, I said no, it was more like a cow's. Something that happened when I was halibut fishing in Alaska. Take off from Seward on a smaller vessel with 3 older guys and my dad. We take the boat about 100 miles offshore, go around to a couple of different spots. Everything goes great. Everyone catches 2 decent-sized halibut, so me and my dad have 4 in total. On the way back, one of the older guys says he has to go whale watch and pees off the back of the boat. About 70 miles offshore at this point. Boat rocks. We all what the hell hard and run out of the cabin. Pissing old guy had fallen down. While helping him up, see a huge, and I mean huge, spout of airy water explode from the ocean. It was like a geyser. 5 minutes later, we're on our way back and see Coast Guard helicopters flying out to the area. Cat picked something up about a boy on radio chatter. I was 16 at the time and thought it was a whale, but why would the Coast Guard be looking for a whale? Some big stuff is out there. I doubt it's interested in us though. I don't have any truly scary stories, but for the most part, diving is pretty creepy. It's impossible to forget you are breathing canned air, and that the smallest mistake could cost you or your partner your lives. A friend brought me to a plane that crashed sometime in the 80s. We were in Lake George, and we were with a group of 6 other divers. One of them was a woman who was older that my friend knew through our dive shop. We were floating around, checking out the plane and taking pictures when the woman lost control. She could not keep her balance, nor could she find the right balance of air in her vest. She ended up rising up and then falling down to the bottom, stirring up a huge cloud of silt. Vertigo hit me as my brain tried to remember where was up, as I knew the obvious thing was to swim above the cloud. It was crazy how fast you can lose your bearings in that situation. All I could see was the inside of my mask, not even my hands in front of my face. It settled down and everything was fine. The woman was embarrassed, but stuff like that happens. It made me imagine being in a cave or a wreck where you seriously have to have everything that's up to you under control. scary stuff, and probably an absolutely terrible way to die. Among my last thoughts, images of my living room and girlfriend on the couch, and thinking, my goddamn stupid hobby killed me. It's impossible to forget you were breathing canned air. I only went diving once, when I was a kid. We were pretty young, so they had us in the pool at the YMCA. I was having fun until I got to the bottom of the deep end. Then all of a sudden, some background part of my brain realized I was underwater and breathing. Just that fact was enough to start freaking me out slightly. It's the only time I've ever felt claustrophobic. Consciously, I knew I was fine, but that little animal instinct in the back of my head was shouting, "You are going to drown." Kinda spoopy diving story. A few weeks ago, I went diving in the Cayman Islands with my dad and uncle and a group of friends. We went diving at around 9 to 10 p.m. at night. Moon was full and hanging over the water like a glow lamp. I was trailing behind Pop and Uncle, so I turned off my dive light and turned around. Our group of friends had gotten separated from us. I quickly found out after doing this, which is fine though, since we knew this reef like the back of their hands, but I could still see the dim bluish glow from their dive lights streaming over the coral ridge that was above me. It was the most mystical/otherworldly stuff I have ever seen. Literally looked like UFO lights hovering over a mountain. It was incredible, and I was completely awestruck. I've never seen anything like it in my entire life. Decide to look somewhere else. I turned my head, and I was met with just an abyss in every sense of the word. It was so unimaginably dark, and very, very, very scary, like something huge could just be swimming at my face, and I would not be able to see it. It was the closest one could be to feeling like they were in space, without actually being in space. Continued diving as normal. We found a little bitty pufferfish and booped it on the head with our depth gauges, which surprised it, and in its flustered state of mind, bumped into a rock before swimming away shyly.